Hi everybody and welcome back to AI in the Woods. If you remember, in the last video we were talking about dimensions and how our mind lives in more dimensions than our body. And we said, how is that possible? We can conceptualize 3 dimensions, but how do we conceptualize higher dimensionalities up to possibly a few hundreds of dimensions, which seems to be the sweet spot for AI systems to think in. So today we're going to look at that idea of multidimensional spaces, and we're going to try to conceptualize them. And the best way to do this is to try and come back to the idea that we might live in 2 dimensions, not 3. Imagine I'm a 2-dimensional creature and I live in the ground of the forest. So if I live in the ground of the forest, I can move towards you, I can move to the side, but maybe I don't know about verticality. I can't move up and down. Imagine another creature, and that creature lives in this tree trunk here. It's able to crawl up and to crawl down, but it can't move towards you or move back inside the trunk. Now, those 2 creatures would see things very differently. We know that things in the world actually live in 3 dimensions. So take this stick, for instance. Here, this stick is a 3-dimensional stick. But if I'm the floor creature, the one that lives in the ground of the forest, remember I can only move in that plane here. So I could crawl from this end of the stick to the other end of the stick, and I would understand that the stick has a length. If I'm the creature living in the tree trunk, I might be able to crawl up and down that stick and understand that the stick has a thickness. But note that only the floor creature understands that the stick has a length, and understands and notes that the tree creature only understands about the thickness of the stick. So they don't have a whole picture of the object as it actually is in 3 dimensions. What would it take for the ground creature to really see the stick in its entirety? Well, they would have to kind of lift themselves up from the ground to realize that there's a verticality and that you can, crawl up and down this tree. At that point, they would be able to see the stick completely. Now, if you think about this, and if you think about understanding how you move from different sets of 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions, you also understand why it is possible to move from different sets of 3 dimensions to higher dimensionalities. So what would it mean for us to move from our perception in 3 dimensions into 6, 9 more dimensions? It would be something as if I was in this forest here and I was walking through some kind of portal that took me to a new set of 3 dimensions. So we would have these 3 and the 3 that are beyond the portal, that's already 6. And all it would take me to go from one to the other is that kind of flipping action to, propel myself into the new set. Now, we can't imagine this with our perceptual system, but you see that it's mathematically completely possible to integrate in our conceptualization of dimensions. And the interesting thing about all this is this idea about perspective. So when you're talking to someone about something, you should be aware that you're actually conceptualizing things possibly in different sets of dimensions. Maybe one of you lives in the ground and the other one lives in the tree trunk. And when you're arguing about things, you're arguing about the meaning of freedom. What should our democracy look like? How should we live? All those big questions. And you notice that you're not quite on the same wavelength. Maybe it's actually because you're seeing things from different perspectives, so from different sets of dimensions. Why is it important for AI systems? It's important for AI systems because, as we will see in the next video, they also have dimensions in their artificial minds. They're expressed in certain mathematical ways, and they express particular properties of the world. Now, it's important to us to know what those dimensions are and what they express, because we want them to be similar enough to ours that we can communicate with those artificial agents. And maybe from an ethical point of view, it's also important to us that they express the sets of values that we actually believe in as societies. So in the next video, we'll talk about all this. We'll talk about how can we think of dimensions and of geometry of perspective inside the mind of an artificial agent. And we will also talk about how we can know what those individual dimensions express in the mind of the machine. So stay tuned. Come back to AI in the Woods next time, and we'll talk about dimensions in much more detail.